Day 8 of the Iran war. The only thing I have to say is I'm every bit as worried as you are. You have a regional, multinational, multi-superpower potential war that is brewing. This is one of the most complex scenarios that I've ever seen us have to face. If you think about the Persian culture, right, this is the longest continuous culture in the world. So to imagine somehow miraculously, because of the internet, they want to become Western societies, you're lying to yourself. This is my recommendation. This goes to you, President Trump. Welcome back, friends. The only thing I have to say is I'm every bit as worried as you are. I don't think anybody in the United States right now or around the world isn't worried in some capacity. And I'll tell you what, you have every right to feel worried. I mean, even me with my limited experience in the SEAL teams, working for the military industrial complex and working for the Central Intelligence Agency, all in very short periods during the early part of the GWAT. I too am concerned as to what the outcome is going to be. We all are. That's a natural feeling that you should have. It's a feeling that requires, in my opinion, a deeper understanding of what the outcome potentially is going to be. And that's relative to what our key leaders, what our allies, and most especially what Iranian officials and the country of 93 million people, how they're going to react to all of this. So today what I thought I would do is I would just break it down as best as possible just to get you up to speed with the things that I'm focusing on to keep me up to speed as well too, so I can have better insights. So the three areas I'll focus on are militarily, what's taking place, what's happening, what's going on, economically, what's taking place, what some are forecasting, what are some of the current situations and challenges, and then finally, politically, what I think is taking place and what we should be thinking about in terms of what we want our leaders to do and how to act moving forward. So, Jordy, what about you, man? How are you doing with how you're interpreting what's going on?
It's a tragic situation. You know, I've never been to war, only read about it or watched it. Regardless of what you think about it, I just go back to what I hear people say: there's no winners in war, right? And so I know that however this works out, and it's already been happening, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough no matter what happens. So it's just hard to swallow, like you said.
It is, man. And I'll never forget the first time that I was ever exposed to it was I was up at doing a postgraduate year in high school up in Connecticut when the first Gulf War broke out. And I remember watching CNN for 24 hours straight, thinking to myself, well, I can cancel going to play football or lacrosse in college because it appears I'm going to get drafted. I'm going to go fight in the Middle East. You know, and at that point, I really didn't understand much. As it turns out, I ended up making my way there anyways. And like you said, there are no winners in war, regardless of what you want to believe or what you want to think of. And I'm by no measure am I condemning anybody who adheres to the orders they're given and carries out their duties as they, commit to our nation or other nations, right? Because that's ultimately who takes the biggest brunt, right? Are the unsuspecting civilians, women and children and the elderly, and then the young men, mostly young men, and the few women that have to engage in this conflict and have to suffer from the catastrophic results of it going sideways. So that's just, it's good to always keep that in your mind when you're evaluating the full context of what's going on. All right, so let's bring some context to you if you're listening. All right, so kind of a chronological events that started on February 28th. We had a really amazing initial strikes taking place. Approximately 500 to 600 targets were hit. And, the interesting thing is, that's a massive variation when you're talking about ballistic missile systems. The difference between 500 and 600 is huge. So really trying to drill down on those specifics. I know the CENTCOM commander has been given some real good sit reps. So that's a place I recommend people go and listen, because if you think from a military tactical perspective, we are succeeding in our precision strikes and objectives. And so there is a positive aspect of that, right? And so, and we're using B-2 stealth bombers, F-35s, we even launched a torpedo to sink, the first time in a long time we've done that. Day 2, they talked about over 400 target strike. Day 2 and 3, another 1,000 plus targets were struck. And then there were some Iranian counterattacks that really began on U.S. bases in the Gulf and prompted defensive intercepts and retaliatory strikes. March 4-5, days 5-6, right? We shifted to targeting Iran's defense industrial base, conducted over 1,700 sorties, hitting about 1,250 targets. And these strikes included electronic warfare to disrupt the Iranian command, a surge in operations, along with the heavier use of gravity-based munitions, right? These are not the laser-guided precision strikes, because one of the great things as a tactical commander, you want to make sure you don't blow your load, so to speak, and now all of a sudden, those strategic munitions, you're empty. And so it's critical to understand that if we can just drop gravity-based munitions and have similar effects, then we've got much greater stockpiles of those types of munitions. Now, day 7s and 8, ongoing strikes against missile launchers, naval assets, and internal security sites. Cumulative targets, roughly around 3,000. And one of the interesting things, which I confirm and agree with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, is that we have achieved air dominance, right? Enabling deeper strikes against infrastructure, as well as Iranian naval capabilities are outright destroyed. So that's pretty awesome. Now, the thing that I think about in terms of just strategic strikes, right? There's never been a war won by simply using strategic strikes, right? And in particular, as it relates to when unconditional surrender is the expectation. And we do know Trump said that, and we'll have Jordy bring that clip up right now and show you what Trump said.
Can you give us an idea of what unconditional surrender looks like to you? I mean, what do you want from Iran?
I said unconditional, not conditional. I said unconditional. It's where they cry uncle, or when they can't fight any longer, there's nobody around to cry uncle. That could happen too, because, we've wiped out their leadership numerous times already. So it's if they surrender, or if there is nobody around to surrender, but they're rendered useless in terms of military.
Now, after listening to Trump, say that, it's really pretty amazing on what that means. And there's a lot of different pundits out there saying what that means in different capacities. But if you look at historically, when that comes out, what that means, that always leads to boots on the ground, and not just a few. It means hundreds of thousands potentially, and also hundreds of thousands of more civilians and women and children being annihilated as well too, right? The most famous unconditional surrender that was not adhered to, I believe, was the Japanese Imperial military back in World War II, which cost them 2 atomic bombs, which we were willing to do. Roughly 200,000 civilians were vaporized in that. Now, the response to that is it saved 1 million plus GIs. All right. And by 4 years in, right, a conditioned population will say, all right, we don't care whatever it takes to bring this thing to the end. The other aspect of unconditional surrender is the deeper impacts that it has on our military industrial complex, right? And what that taxes. Now, it's critical for you to understand we have already been waging a 4-year proxy war in Ukraine, right? And we have supplied a tremendous amount of munitions, intelligence support, training support, just a tremendous amount of resources has been during the Biden administration in order to support the Ukrainian effort against Russia. So we definitely have some strategic challenges, mostly, I believe, within our precision guided munitions. Now, we did see Trump bring in the military industrial complex to the White House this week and basically said, you guys got to start maintaining production. Jordy's going to put up a quote that came out a result of that from Lockheed Martin, and they're going to quadruple output. Now, hopefully, what this will do is it'll also open up for all of these other smaller defense contractors that want to get in the game to help us build disposable drones, right? Because when you take a step back, and I'm just going to go through some more statistics in terms of munitions here in a second, those are the ones that really become the high threat. And we've seen that both in Ukraine, and we're starting to see the remnants of it in Iran as well, too. So here's some of the estimated U.S. munitions, right? Missiles anywhere from 500 to 1,000 launched. Again, a massive guess. And by the way, when I use Grok to prompt to get these types of numbers and these back eyes understanding, right? And these are Tomahawk cruise missiles. They say up to 400 deployed, air launch variation interceptors, right? The Patriot and the THAAD. Those interceptors are incredibly expensive. Iranian used defensively against Iranian retaliation. 1,000 to 1,500 have been expected, costing anywhere from $5 to $10 billion. Okay. Sorties, over 2,000 combat sorties. Conducted with 1,700 in the first 72 to 96 hours alone. That involves 200 aircraft. Now, when you think about that, you have to think about aircraft parts. You have to think about fuel. You have to think about munitions dropped, right? And the cost hours on the engines, maintenance, all of this. All of these things have to be we lost 3 F-15s over Kuwait on like day 2 or day 3 it was. And Jordy will show one of those falling out of the sky and some of the imagery of those pilots on the ground in Kuwait. So how much does an F-15 cost, right? Luckily, we haven't lost any other major aircraft or ships whatsoever. All right. Bombs dropped somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000, including JDAM, precision-guided missions, 500 to 2,000 palm variants. Right. And we're going to, as I said before, we're going to shift towards gravity-based bombs to save on our precision-guided missiles. At least one confirmed torpedo. That was awesome. Drones, we've launched, again, 200 to 500 one-way attack drones, the MQ-9 Reapers used for strikes. Defensive intercepts have gone against Iranian drones, some 1,300 to 2,000. Now, total cost of this right now, and it was funny, I made a post. All right, someone needs to start a debt tracker for this war. And the next thing I know, I saw one pop up, and that was yesterday, and it had us at $9 billion already. So rough estimates, this is going to cost somewhere between $7 to $10 billion per day initially, with tapering off to $1 billion, with a cumulative $50 to $70 billion in expenditure by March 7th, anywhere by end of March. Okay. So why is it critical? Well, guess what? If we don't have the precision guided munitions to support our own efforts, right, and we get depleted, how does that help us in a potential if China decides to take down Taiwan because we're preoccupied by this? What if Russia launches a more aggravated assault against Kiev, or starts upping their precision missile, or really starts to take out Ukrainian forces, or Iran continues to launch its drone attacks against further Gulf states, which, again, as I said in the beginning, the president just came out today. I saw someone post that the president of Iran has said, we apologize for Gulf states getting hit. I think he's probably trying to hedge his bet right now because he knows that the Gulf states are frustrated. And one of the ones that really popped for me was recently a billionaire from the region got up and said, hey, listen, this is bad. And so Jordy's going to post that right now for us. And then also the president of UAE got up and made a statement that was pretty enlightening as to, hey, listen, this is not what we intended, we asked for. We need to really come together as a group of Gulf states and say, hey, what's the plan here? What are our vulnerabilities? Because just today, early morning when I got up from last night's strikes, Israel's really starting to target Iran's oil production facilities and their refinement capabilities and all that. And I'll get into the political ramifications here in a second. So you also got to understand, are the targets in Saudi Arabia, are they vulnerable? They have major production facilities all over. There's all the other Gulf states are vulnerable as well too. You've got desalination plants along the coast, which most of the Gulf Coast states use desalination to be able to bring fresh water to their populations. What if those get attacked? And now all of a sudden you have these populations that are vulnerable. And so I would imagine right now that many of the Gulf state ambassadors or Gulf state leaders are trying to get into Trump to have sit downs and say, hey, listen, we just committed a profound amount of money to you and your efforts to reindustrialize America, to produce new chip manufacturers, which ultimately go where? In these missile systems, in these one-way drone systems, right? So if the Middle East is going to finance our reindustrialization of our chip development, and then all of a sudden they pull their money, and then we can't enhance or deliver on chip production to fulfill the munitions depletion, you have to think about the ramifications on our operational abilities in there, right? All right. Obviously, damage to Iranian targets has been overwhelming. You can just, like I said, go and listen to some of the CENTCOMs. There's an admiral who's been getting up and giving some pretty outstanding SITREP briefings on damage and what's taken place. I looked up and saw what the Israel productive strikes were. On February 28th, they were claiming their strike was the one who killed the Ayatollah Khomeini, and then other infrastructure with 26 waves of attacks in 24 hours. They've also had hundreds of missiles launched and struck. About 1,200 munitions dropped. Day 2, March 4-5, strikes on industrial and security bases, 4,000 total munitions. March 6-7, continued waves of missile strikes against IRGC bases. Total estimates, anywhere between 80 and 100 aircraft were used, hundreds of targets per day, to really focus on missile degradation, right? Because of what happens if they don't focus there. Iranian missiles, which we've seen, have launched extensive strikes into Israel, in many cases overwhelming some of the Israeli dome abilities, right? I saw one, Jordy showed the one image. There was an Iranian missile that came over and then split into these cluster distribution missiles. And when you look at that, it's like, oh my God, that's pretty pretty intense with what's going on there. Saying all that to say this about military. Again, I have to reaffirm, when you look at a strategic concept, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people in the Trump administration, at the Pentagon, at the agency that, are still veterans of the GWAT, right? There's plenty of guys that understand the complexities of waging a long-term war on the ground against even a non-militarily superior adversary, right? Just with insurgencies, guerrilla warfare, fighting, all that. But if you're going to get a comprehensive regime change, which is to topple the government and instill someone else, you most likely you're going to have to grab hold of certain large populations or cities and be able to install or allow someone to go in. My funniest one, again, the 60-minute interview with the son of the Shah, who's been sitting in England and in DC for the last 40 years, who's never run anything in your life. He said, I'll accept the call from the Iranian people. I want to know which people have called them into action.
Are you saying in this interview that you wouldn't lead Iran?
That's a different thing. They trust me as a transitional leader, not as the future king or future president or future whatever. I'm totally focused on my mission in life, which is let me bring the country to a point that they can make that free choice. That will be enough for me having said mission accomplished.
I don't know anybody that would want that guy to run, to take over. So again, we come back to the fact of what is going to happen. How are we going to get in and maintain control so someone, preferably some anti-government Iranian person that has some underground resistance or whatever, that can move in? And what we seem to be hearing from Bibi and other political leaders around the world is that, or not around the world, but in Israel specifically, as well as some in America, they want the supposed uprising that we saw several months ago to facilitate into the ability to take over the country. But if you know anything about civil wars, they're very messy. They're very difficult. So it requires getting weapon systems, intelligence, a whole slew of tactical realities need to be integrated into this shift in the power dynamic that's taking place internally in Iran. Now, one of the things that broke in the news is that there's talk of using Kurdish fighters to help facilitate the overthrow or the uprising or whatever it might be. And then they could go in, initiate, start probing Iranian defenses, see what's going on. And then somehow we could support them either using CIA assets or using military assets or whatever it might be. We can help facilitate their ground game. All right. There's a couple different of these groups. All right. The CIA is reportedly working and providing weapons, including small arms, to Iranian Kurdish factions, such as the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, the KDPI, the Kurdistan Freedom Party, the PAK, and underneath the coalition of political forces of Iranian Kurdistan, the CPFIK. Again, that's three factions of Kurds. Now, I'm sure each faction wants to be the man. And so they're going to start to jockey to see who gets to reign control. So when you use these types of external forces, a lot of times it doesn't always go the way you want it. Trust me from personal experience. All right. Operational objectives, right? Again, like I said, we're going to use these forces. They're going to go begin to probe, disrupt, and then our satellite imagery, our ability to collect intelligence on the ground, we can get a better assessment of what might come next in terms of upgrading to where we have to use American troops on the ground to help facilitate this. And obviously Israeli troops would have to support us as well too. Now, timeline and scale. Again, this is the hardest part about the whole thing is our battle damage assessments. We really we don't generally know what's going on. Have we seen a reduction in Iranian capabilities? 100%. But we also know that Iran has been in production of somewhere between 500 and 1,000 of these, $50,000 drones they make, one-way drones that are pretty good tactical in terms of their ability to execute on targets. We have no idea what the total counts on those are. Now, there's estimates, and again, you're going to get an estimate. They've got between 13,000 and 18,000. Well, that's a big range, a big difference. So until we get that hard intel, it's very difficult how to direct these ground forces, these guerrilla ground forces against, or even if we step up and we start, because I'm sure there's some people both at the Pentagon, JSOC, and other places like, let's put in JSOC units. Let's put in ground branch units. Let's start getting on the ground to get a better assessment. Because listen, if you're an operator, you want to go operate. You want to see what you can do. And this is one of the most complex scenarios that I've ever seen us have to face since, I would even say going back to Korea, because of the sheer magnitude of Chinese forces they fed. They had these endless waves of people. All right. Now, here's the other problem that you have to understand, right? All right. Before we get into the next aspect of this madness right here, I just really want to talk about how blessed we are to be sponsored by Black Rifle Coffee. I've been a Black Rifle fan and supporter since the beginning, since Evan came up with the idea years and years and years ago. We drink it at home. Today, I just want to tell you about their new cold brew, Just Black, that came out. This is really an amazing. It's for those who really love a bold flavor without compromise, right? And it's made from premium coffee beans and steeped cold for a smoother, naturally rich taste. This is ready to drink can that delivers a crisp, refreshing finish with every single sip. Now, you can find Black Rifle all over the place, from Bass Pro Shops to pop-up stores that sell Black Rifle, tactical stores. You can get it at Walmart, or just go online, which I recommend you do the most. Just go to blackriflecoffee.com, either sign up for your subscription or order that single case and get your cold brew soon. If you like cold brew in a can, man, on the go, this is the cold brew for you. Again, that's Black Rifle's cold brew, Just Black, at blackriflecoffee.com. Hoo-yah. Love you guys. There is a historical reality to our relationship with the Kurds. And we've supported them in different things, right? The U.S., alongside Iran and Israel, covertly armed Iraqi Kurds back in the 1970s, led by Mustafa Barzani, with Soviet weapons via the CIA to weaken Saddam Hussein's regime to counter Soviet influence. All right. You heard what I said. In the 70s, we worked with Iran and the Kurds to go after Saddam Hussein. In 1991, the Gulf War aftermath, we encouraged Iraqi Kurds and Shia to rise against Saddam Hussein post-Desert Storm. However, the initial action allowed Iraqi forces to crush uprising, killing tens of thousands of Kurds. U.S. Special Forces later provided humanitarian aid to the decimated Kurdish forces. 2003, Iraqi invasion. CIA and U.S. Special Forces collaborated with Iraqi Kurdish regimes, the Kurdish Peshmerga, northern Iraq, to open up a second front against Saddam. And they provided us intelligence, ground support, and help key cities like Kirkuk and Mosul. Fast forward in the 2014 to 19 campaign against ISIS, which is just go down the rabbit hole of how ISIS got its start. The U.S. partnered with Iraqi Peshmerga and Syrian Kurdish YPG as part of the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, to combat ISIS, receive arms, training, and support. Wait, well, guess what? Well over 11,000 Kurdish forces died. And the withdrawal from the U.S. In northeastern Syria allowed Turkish incursions seen all other, because the Turks hate the Kurds and have been fighting the Kurds as well, too. The Turks fight the Kurds, the Iraqis fight the Kurds, the Iranians fight the Kurds, the Syrians fight the Kurds. And we always partner with them to help facilitate our little covert clandestine operations. And at the outcome, the Kurds end up usually taking heavies. So do I have a lot of hopes that the Kurds are going to get on board with us? No, I don't. So do I really believe that's possible? I don't know. I also know that if you give people gigantic pallets of cash or big gigantic bags of cash and weapons and munitions, you might get a couple thousand that'll go wreak a little havoc for you. But then again, they'll also go bomb some innocent people and say, hey, look, we just bombed. Give us another $10 million. We'll go bomb the next city and the next city. And next thing you know, we're spending ungodly amounts of money with these rebel forces that really aren't having any effect. We're just draining our accounts and burning other political bridges. All right. We do know that Iran has, from their military perspectives, has been successful, right? They have been disrupting many different things, all right? The number one thing, they have been killing people in Israel. We know that's a fact, but they've also been striking a bunch of other places, right? And I just want to go down the list of all the different places. So Azerbaijan was struck. 2 drones struck Azeri military position. Bahrain, right? Homeland of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the U.S. Naval Headquarters, airports, military airfields. Iraq, right? Strikes on U.S. bases near Erbil, causing explosions. Kurdish forces, drone and missile hits on pro-Kurdish positions, killing several fighters, damaging more. Israel, as I said, ballistic missile strike near Jerusalem, damage on Iron Dome battery. 9 to 11 Israelis are killed. Command centers hit in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Jordan was hit. Missile debris struck near Muwafaq. Well, I don't know how to say that. Salty Air Base. Kuwait was struck. Oman was struck. Qatar was struck. Saudi Arabia was struck. Syria was struck. The UAE was struck. All right. Overall impacts of Iranian strikes. Now, again, here's rough numbers, roughly between 100 and 200 casualties, mostly civilians from debris and proximity. Far less than U.S.-Israel operations, which we estimate somewhere around 12,000 or 1,200 Iranian deaths. So, yes, has there been collateral damage on the ground? 100% there has. Is there potential for increased collateral damage? Yeah, there is, because, again, I go back to the fact, yeah, we've seen a massive degradation in Iranian capability. But if you were preparing with the inevitable reality that after the strike this past summer, would you just get all your stuff and get out in the open and be susceptible to strikes? No, right? Everything that all of our enemy have learned over the last 70 years is that you take the first wave, sit back, let America gain confidence, let us gain confidence, let us make some moves, think about what we're going to do, and then you start, random strikes. You start probing hard and soft targets. That's what I believe is taking place now. Again, I go back. How many of these unmanned kamikaze drones does Iran have? And they're pretty easy. We've seen them deployed in many different war zones in Ukraine and now in the Middle East on how this works. And so I believe we've only yet begun to see. There was recently a post. I saw a video of the Doha airport being struck, or was it? I think it was in the Dubai International Airport was struck. Now, when Dubai's getting struck, that's going to, again, piss off these Gulf states who said, we didn't agree to this thing. Like, you just went ahead and did it. And so I would imagine the people who are in power and in the White House and in that inner circle they're starting to put pressure on, I would imagine, on the president and some of his cabinet saying, okay, what are the next steps? Because what we don't want to lose is all the work that we had conducted from the original Abrahamic Accords in his first term. Remember, that was the defining political victory of Trump's first term, was the Abrahamic Accords. And that was destabilizing the conflict between Israel and those Gulf states to what? To open up investment and trade, right? To restructure those dynamics. Well, if that fractures, we're going to see it, and it's going to happen quickly. Why? Well, obviously, vulnerabilities to their populations, right? Populations will only take so much. And trust me when I tell you, it's not like these populations in the Gulf states have a profound love for America, for Americans, right? I rightfully agree that Iran has no love lost for America, death to America since the Islamic Revolution. I get it. And yes, there have been plenty of Americans that have suffered, including my comrades during the GWAT. Roughly some 600 plus people were killed by Iranian Kurdish IEDs and VBIDs and that type of thing in Iraq. So yeah, we also had the bombing in Lebanon through proxies waging that constant war against American presence in the Middle East. Again, you have to put this in reality and context, all right? Don't be naive. If someone were to come and camp out in your backyard, you're going to get pissed. So we essentially have been camped out in the Middle East, not just since the 2000s, not just since the 1990s or the 1970s or the 1960s, but all the way back from when we first discovered the massive quantities of what? Crude oil that exists in the Middle East, and then liquid natural gas. So we have a significant presence. And even, before us, it was the British, the French, and they had carved up the region and occupied that region for a very long period of time. So think about that. Think about if we had other countries, more like, let's call it Russia, back in the day, during the Soviet Union, had somehow finagled away, split up, and been able to come into the United States, camp out, and pull out our natural resources, you'd be pissed. So you have to understand that's a reality. You also have to understand that these people's culture is not some new culture right out of the gate. All right. These are cultures. If you think about the Persian culture, right? This is the longest continuous culture in the world. Some people might argue that Chinese culture is older, but certainly we know, Persia and Persians have been a consolidated, functioning society for what, 7,000, 8,000 years, something crazy like that. So to imagine somehow miraculously, because of the internet, they want to become Western societies, you're lying to yourself. Now, a big argument I'm hearing is that, hey, this is worth it because they're an existential threat. We've got to get rid of them. We've got to do that. Okay, great. If you believe that, you can prove it to me and show me what they're doing other than these proxy limited attacks. And you want to say limited because it's not like they have killed 500,000 people like fentanyl has in the United States, right? Then you have to start to gauge the reality of your estimations, right? These people do not want to be democratic. They do not want to be Americans. They certainly don't want to be Israeli, and they certainly don't want to be Jewish, right? Or Christian. And again, there is a framework of this in certain people's eyes that this, for most, is a religious war in nature. All right. And if you look at, all you got to do is just spend some time looking at what the Ayatollahs are talking about, the Shias. Look at what the mullahs are talking about. Look at what the rabbis are talking about. Look at what the pastors and the preachers are saying. And there is a ton of that talk going on. All right. I'm not going to go down that game because I'm trying to stay in something that's palatable and contextual for you to get a better understanding. All right. So this is a numbers game with munition. All right. And don't forget the expenditures from Ukraine, right? It's a numbers game for what the military industrial complex can start producing, right? It's a numbers game with costs, right? It's a numbers game with friendly assets getting attacked in the Gulf states, right? How many will happen before they completely turn against us? It's a numbers game with world opinion of us and other countries. There's already multiple countries that have chastised the United States. Now, here's the other little tidbit in terms of numbers game too. You want to assess militarily, and then I'm going to move on to economics. And I've been going for a long time, but so the last big thing is: do you believe that Russia and China are going to get involved as they see an opportunity to do what we've been doing in Ukraine to us in Iran? It's a simple question. If you answer no, then I think you should just go back to scrolling your feed and liking, the latest, new band or supplement or whatever is out there. All right. Keep in your feed and keep your head down, because that's exactly what's going on. Obviously, there's been a bunch of reports about Russia and China helping with intelligence and targeting systems to be more strategic on vulnerabilities that we have in the region. So now you've got what? All these different countries that have been struck, all their infrastructure at jeopardy, right? You've got now all three of the major superpowers, right, integrating. Oh, and the other thing militarily that I just want to say is now you've got Israel striking Lebanon as well, too. So now you've got Syria in that area that's getting fired up. And guess who runs Syria? A former Al-Qaeda member, right? They're itching to get in this fight, I bet, as well, too. And all you got to do is listen to some of the things that are coming out of their posts online, right? So now what do you have? You have a regional, multinational, multi-superpower potential war that is brewing. Okay? So that's a reality. I'm not making that up. That's all it is taking a look at the 40,000 foot of what the ramifications might be. All right. I'm going to go through, obviously I didn't talk a lot about the European Union and what's going on. I think they have a major stake in this for economic reasons, for sure, in terms of oil. We know they're all struggling with energy costs. The head of NATO, Mark Rutte, came out and said he condemns Iran's escalation, which I thought was funny. What else are they supposed to do? What'd you think they were going to do, type of thing? But then again, remember, he's going to support us because he wants to keep waging proxy war against Russia. That'll benefit the European Union. All right. But we really haven't seen any significant commitments from countries that have legitimate military support, other than they're going to help let us use some of their bases. There is some talk about some British fleet helping us escort oil ships in and around the Straits of Hormuz, but not much else. The other thing that I found really fascinating is there's been several countries who've now come out and said, we're going to increase our nuclear development capabilities. And then new countries have said, we are going to begin a nuclear program. So the irony of this whole thing, that this was all sold to the American populace and the world, we are going to destroy Iranians' nuclear capability, is actually intensifying nuclear requirements for other people, right? They're saying, hey, no, now we're in another level. We need to protect ourselves. We're going to start nuclear programs, right? Taking the caps off development. We need more bombs. So that's also, all right, that's the last thing, economic impacts. So The overwhelming economic reality that we have to pay attention to is crude oil and LNG distribution around the world. Now, the all passage of the Straits of Hormuz has been reduced to almost nothing, right? I saw one ship made the run through it the other day. They were tracking it, and there was someone had see if you can find that the one ship so whoever labeled it gave it some hilarious label. That was kind of interesting. That they went Leroy Jenkins on getting through the Straits of Hormuz, Leroy Jenkins. And if you don't know, that's an obscure comment from the GWAT, which is hilarious. We used to say that on targets when there was no plan. We're just going to go Leroy Jenkins. So
let's do this, Leroy Jenkins.
Oh my God, he just ran in.
Anyways, that was an inside joke you didn't understand. So think about this, right? It's going to affect energy markets and control of the Straits of Hormuz, through which about 20% of global oil and 15 to 20% of liquefied natural gas transits. All right. What we're going to see is energy markets are going to be affected first, right? Bent crude surged 10 to 15 percent from around $70 to $75 per barrel pre-war, to 82 to 93 by March 7, with peaks over 90. The Straits disruption has removed 20 million barrels per day, equivalent to 20% of global supply. The closure persists beyond 30 days. Prices could hit, and again, these are all guesses, 100, which we'd be creeping into a recession, to $200 per barrel, which is a guaranteed recession. Now, let me get to that recession component. Now, when you think about the reduction and you think about what this means, you really have to begin to understand all the Gulf states and how their economies work based on that ability to get through the Straits of Hormuz, right? All those Gulf states, and they supply India, they supply Pakistan, they supply China, they supply Japan, all international, Korea, right? South Korea, Taiwan, Seoul, all these trading partners with us, Australia, all these manufacturing abilities, their energy output, that's going to impact their GDP, the global economy, right? Now, America, we're doing good because we've got our own natural productions, but certainly EU, India, China, and a lot of other people. So what happens if China starts paying more costs to be able to put our goods that we have an insatiable appetite for on ships to drive them over to the United States? Guess what? Your costs are going up, right? Which probably has a direct correlation to inflation probably going up. Less goods and service because there's less oil flow. It's harder to get stuff over out of transport. And then cost of transport goes up. And then guess what? The companies are not going to they're not going to eat those costs. They're going to put them on you. All right. As I said, higher energy costs are increasing transportation and manufacturing expenses, potentially adding, it says 0.6, 0.7 percentage points to global inflation for every sustained $10 to $20 rise in oil prices. All right. So let's say we get to $180 per barrel from where we're at today, which is let's call it 80. Right. That's a pretty significant increase to inflationary and GDP spending. Right. All right. How does it affect global markets? All right. And investor sentiment. All right. Stock market, global equities lost $3.2 trillion in value in the first 4 days. Now, again, we're not seeing a lot of challenges. We're not seeing a lot of companies collapse or lose, but 3.2 trillion in market valuation, that's significant. That's significant, right? And so what happens when people start to realize that there's a potential a negative outcome on their portfolios? What? They're going to look to liquefy, right? They're going to look to get cash, right? Now, a lot of people will try and put money in currencies, and definitely this will strengthen the dollar, right? The positive in any of these types of things is that our currency strengthens in terms of also having as the benchmark currency of the world. That's good. That's positive for us. And then on the other side of that, the Federal Reserve is probably going to delay those rate cuts that were planned up here in a little bit, right? Leading to higher borrowing costs, and $100 oil price could drag U.S. GDP by 0.3 percentage points. Now, you hear 0.3 and you're like, whatever, no big deal. But remember, this is accumulating effect, and it doesn't stay at the aggregate, doesn't stay at one singular. It intensifies and exponentially grows as all the other problems start impacting it, right? Inflation growth, recession risk. All right, inflation. Global projections now include a 0.5 to 1% uptick if energy prices stay elevated, with foods and good prices raising due to higher transport costs. U.S. gasoline hit $3.32 per gallon, up from $2.99, and diesel exceeded $4. Growth is already slow, but this is definitely going to slow it down more. And then also, if this becomes somewhere between a $50 and $100 billion cost to expenditure for this, it's also going to put deeper fears into global markets, right, and into our market as well too. Obviously, shipping costs are going to go through the roof. Aviation, tourism is going to decline in all these places. Manufacturing and supply chains are going to be affected dramatically, which all have what? Cascading impacts on the global economy. Now, in terms of our own oil production, we still are producing a tremendous amount. We also have our new relationships with Venezuela. So we seem to be somewhat insulated. Now, Europe is going to have definitely higher energy costs, right? And probably going to have to start openly purchasing oil from who again? You guessed it, Russia, thereby intensifying and supporting Russia's efforts to bring down the Ukrainian efforts against it. Obviously, the Asian markets are completely dependent on this oil, so their economies are going to be affected as well too. All right. The one thing I thought was interesting, and I don't know if you saw this, Jordy, but there was another little thing that came out in terms of private equity. Last week, as of March 26, the private credit sector, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, announced restrictions on withdrawals from one of its flagship funds, right? And this was it, right? This is limiting withdrawals from the HPS Corporate Lending Fund. The fund is HLEND if you look at on the index right out there. So this was announced March 6th. Now, BlackRock disclosed that $26 billion in HPS Corporate Lending Fund acquired as part of its push to private credit received redemption requests. That means people wanted to pull money out of it at $1.2 billion in the first quarter of 26, representing about 9.3 of the fund's net asset value. However, the fund enforced its standard 5% quarterly redemption cap, paying out only $620 million to investments. This left some requests unmet. All right. Now, their rationale of this, the decision was framed as a protective measure to maintain the fund's stability, as private credit funds are designed as semi-liquid vehicles with built-in limits to avoid fire sales of assets during stress periods. BlackRock emphasized that this was a feature of a product and not as a flex to freak out from people. Hey, we're shutting down your ability to withdraw your investment. This also affected Blackstone. They put some restrictions on some of theirs as well too. Their shares took a pretty significant beating as a result of this at 7.2% on March 6, closing at $955 per share. So they're sitting pretty good because of their net assets. But I found, right, it was interesting because if private equity is hit, right? In a very significant chance, right? Because under these high stress periods, banks really shut down lending because they want to make sure they protect their assets as, all the chaos is taking place in the market, volatility increases. So if that private equity frees up, which supplies what? Most of our small businesses out there, new development, new venture, a lot of that comes from private equity, people being able to sell their companies and retire, whatever it might be. So if there's a scare in private equity, that also can have profound long-term ramifications. And maybe we'll go find Bryce Jordy and bring him on to see his thoughts on what the ramifications for this.
Bring him back. We need him.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, one of the things that from an economic perspective is obviously it'd be a good time to maybe shift some efforts out of some of the top tech 7, the Magnificent 7, which is have a really bizarre weight in the markets right now. Maybe shift those over to some energy companies right now, especially American energy companies, American industrialization companies, building, manufacturing, the defense industry, obviously. So just be heads up that, this is going to disrupt some of the things out there, in particular gas prices at the most. Now, does it lead to a recession? I don't know. It sure feels like that's a potential. I know there's the head economist who works with Bryce has been calling for bear markets and a recession for quite a few quarters now. This could be the thing that definitely tips us into that. And recessions under these contexts have a tendency to last a little bit longer than typical recessions, right? All right. Last one, and I'll go quick on this because you're probably burnt out from all of that information. I want you to realize that it's key to understand information, all right? Before I get into politics, I just really want to give one of our new sponsors a shout out. I am stoked to introduce you to one of the new awesome supplement companies out there, Revival Nutrition. I know you've been listening to a while, and if you're paying attention to what I'm talking about, then you realize that performance, resilience, and your health are all huge parts of your ability to succeed in life against the negative insurgency. If you can't perform at a high level, your body isn't operating in its best capacity. Energy, resilience, recovery, mental clarity, all of it starts with how you fuel your body. That's why I want to truly introduce you to what I believe is the next great supplement company, and that's Revival Nutrition. Revival Nutrition is a premium nutraceutical company operating in the wellness space that focuses on science-backed supplementation and advanced nutrient delivery systems. One of the things that really sets them apart is the use of liposomal delivery technology. Now, I know, what the hell is liposomal delivery? Here's what it is, and here's why it matters. Most traditional supplements come in pills, capsules, or powders, and a lot of those nutrients never get fully absorbed into your body. Liposomal delivery systems are designed to help protect nutrients and improve how they're delivered and utilized. This can support high bioavailability. Now, what's that mean? It means how much your body, your gut, your intestines actually absorb of the nutrients. In other words, this is a smarter way to take your supplements. Revival Nutrition is focused on developing high-quality formulations that combine strong scientific principles with products that actually taste great and work great. Because let's be honest, if something tastes terrible or feels like it's a chore to take every day, most people will not be consistent with it. Their mission is simple at Revival. They make science-based wellness easier to understand, easier to take, and more effective for people who want to take ownership and focus on the premium nature of performance within their health. If you're somebody who values performance like I do, you talk about resilience and taking care of your body so you can show up every day and be in the fight, then this company is definitely worth checking out. Okay, what I want you to do is click the link in the description or head over to revivalnutrition.com/rut. That's Romeo Uniform Tango, RUT, to check out what's available for you. And when you're going and buying, why don't you put in David as a promo code and get yourself a good discount on your first purchase? Ooh, yeah. Let's get back to the political ramifications for Trump and the political benefits for the Democratic Party. All right. So unless you live under a rock, you are not familiar with the massive challenges going within the MAGA movement. There seems to be a split. Some are calling MAGA dead. There's a lot of people who are saying it's MEGA. People are now kind of describing themselves as America first as opposed to MAGA, which is interesting. And a lot of that is a derivative of what? The promises that the Trump party made, or Trump himself very much made, along the lines. Now, I have gone back and seen some ideas. There was a video from Trump way back in the day giving his thoughts on Iran, and maybe, Jordy, we could play that for you.
The Iranian situation is a case in point. That they hold our hostages is just absolutely and totally ridiculous. That this country sits back and allows a country such as Iran to hold our hostages, to my way of thinking, is a horror. And I don't think they'd do it with other countries. I honestly don't think they'd do it with other countries.
Obviously, you're advocating that we should have gone in there with troops, etc., and brought our boys out.
I absolutely feel that, yes. I don't think there's any question, and there's no question in my mind. I think right now would be an oil-rich nation, and I believe that we should have done it, and I'm very disappointed that we didn't do it, and I don't think anybody would have held us in abeyance. I don't think anybody would have been angry with us. And we had every right to do it at the time.
Okay, so obviously, Trump has had opinions about Iran for long periods of time, and maybe those have shifted based on intelligence he's known. But what we do know is that he was going to profess as the No New Wars president. Now, he likes to say he stopped 8 wars, but the war we really wanted him to stop, obviously, was the war in Ukraine, which has not happened. So if it were me, I'd be analyzing what went wrong there. And then now, after, he's had multiple series of negotiations with Iran that have not brought anything to fruition. And now we're in the second campaign against Iran, with some people, including Trump, calling for unconditional surrender, on what the ramifications that means. So obviously there are going to be many people, mostly people who feel slighted on the Iraq war, the lie that was told, the ridiculous extension of Afghanistan and the pullout there. Obviously the clandestine war we waged in Syria, as well as some of these other places around that area and region of the world. So he has to start figuring out what his narrative is going to be, because if you look at this quote from Rubio about why we struck first and how, I think it's pretty telling there that there is a distinct coordination with our Israeli allies as to the effects of this.
And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Now, I would haven't really gone through enough I haven't gone through enough analysis of people who really understand Israel's current position and what their intentions are in this. Obviously, we know they believe that Iran is an existential threat, and I believe that too. If I were Israel and lived in Israel, man, if I had the opportunity to engage this, I sure would as well too. But it's I don't think there's any illusion that Israel can successfully complete the task of wiping out the complete Iranian regime and its effort and its hatred towards Israel. So they definitely need us. What I would like to see is a better description of what's going on. I'd like to see a consolidated messaging coming out of the Trump cabinet and what's going on. Now, it certainly didn't help that Kristi Noem was fired recently for some of her boondoggles. That basically destabilized it as well, too. It also doesn't help that a lot of these negotiations are not going according to plan. And it doesn't help that the Gulf states are becoming very vocal about their desire to end this immediately and their the rumblings that they're going to pull out any economic support for the reindustrialization of America. So there's some massive political ramifications internationally, as we already know. But internally, what I think it does for sure, after the challenge that the Trump administration faced in Minnesota with the ICE raids and the ICE things and the 2 Americans getting shot, there was a backlash of all of this. And so people were getting upset. And so he tapered down, brought in Tom Holden, started working with Minnesota government officials. Obviously, Tim Walz is getting pounded. If you saw him recently in Congress in his deposition, I mean, it was pathetic. Fraud everywhere around. He had no answers. Yeah, for sure. But there's also seems to be some fracture internal in the Trump organization as well. So what could benefit the Democrats? Obviously, there is a massive challenge, obviously, in the upcoming midterms, right? And the midterms, you have to understand it like this, right? So in the November midterms, Republicans already, we maintain a narrow control, both the chamber of Congress, right? That's the House and the Senate. Because of our gains in 24 with a 53-45 majority in the Senate, 2 independents usually caucusing with Democrats, effectively giving Democrats 47 votes, right? And a slim majority, 218 to 214 in the House. Now this gives us some leverage, not great leverage, because obviously when we think about a lot of the codification of DOGE, we think about a lot of the, things to be able to secure our elections, the SAVE Act, there's a stalemate going on. There's a pushback, and that I think that's coming from the Republican side and the rhinos that are entrenched who have a true disdain for Trump anyways, like Mitch McConnell, Cornyn from Texas, who's in the fight of his life with Paxton right now. And hopefully Paxton ekes that out. Now in the House, you got to realize that there is, the midterms where all 435 House seats and 35 Senate seats are up for grabs. All right. 3 Democrats aim to flip at least 3 House districts and 4 Senate seats to regain majorities, potentially creating a check on Trump's power. What happens if that happens? We go into the ultimate lame duck, right? And what begins? Certainly, they're going to impeach him. Certainly, they're going to disrupt all investigations because they'll gain control of these committees, right? So that no more investigations. So to get to the bottom of Russiagate, to get to the bottom of COVID, to get to the bottom of all these things, that basically grinds to a halt, thereby attacking once again one other more giant strategic act of draining the swamp that Trump ran on. So the midterms are in play at a substantial way. All right. So how does that affect, Trump and the MAGA base? All these congressmen and senators that need Trump's support. Well, if he's in a political quagmire himself, will his support have any meaning to these people who are running in these very contested races? And so we have to start. We've been trying to bring some lower level political people running on just to get a sense of what they're seeing on the local level and these state runs and what's going on. And there's definitely some consternation in their campaigns based on what's going on around in the system right now. Now, The Democratic Party, if I were you, I would just sit back and let this thing unfold, right? Yeah, make your little comments here and there, do your little push those punches. You know, you're going to hear a tremendous amount from the Democrats. He has no plan. They have no plan. They don't know what they're doing. This is causing havoc. But then you're also, where you're going to see is you're going to see all those NGOs that we've discovered that are funding these other campaigns, the anti-ICE raids, the anti-war movement, the anti-Wall Street, all this stuff. They're going to flood those people starting here, probably this month, the end of the month, and the next. You will see a political firestorm to the likes which you will have never seen domestically in this country. Mark my words. Why? Because if you can prove that Trump doesn't have control of the Middle East situation and Trump doesn't have control of the domestic situation, that pretty much solidifies the MAGA split. Who's ever in the MAGA, obviously you're going to have the diehard Trump people that are going to go there, right? And then you're going to have the coalition folks, the libertarians, the America First people, maybe some Blue Dog Democrats that got on board against all this DEI stuff or whatever. They're going to probably sit on the sidelines, right? And just on the sidelines now, all of a sudden you have sway. And if we don't have control of who's voting, how they're voting, because no rules have been changed. Mail-in balloting hasn't been changed. Election IDs haven't been changed. All this. So we're right back where we were, you know, and then the real reality is that, you know, it is Elon Musk and all of the other people that have vast audiences going to come in and support the political campaigns of all these MAGA Republicans. And we're already see that start to look like it's not going to happen. So what does that mean? That means we lose the House and the Senate. All right. A lot of that is going to unfold here in the next, I think, 15 to 30 days. We'll see. This is my recommendation. And this goes to you, President Trump and your cabinet. Come out tomorrow or this week, maybe one more week of pounding them, and declare victory, right? Say, yep, we accomplished missing task. The Ayatollah is dead. The whole upper echelon of the IRGC is gone. We've completely destroyed all and 90% of their military capabilities. And we won. And then pull back, stop striking them. And then this gives you what? It gives you time to reassess, reestablish, and get back to your Gulf states, bring a heightened protection to your Gulf states, increase your missiles, your defensive missile systems in all of these Gulf states, start escorting the oil ships through the Straits of Hormuz. But come out there and be strong and declare victory, and then have all your other personnel say the same thing. We did it. We won. Then what I would do is I would have J.D. Vance, Mark Rubio fly over with the Gulf states, have a big meeting, say this, what do you guys want? What do you need? Can you help us broker, move forward with peaceful resolution? I'd have J.D. Vance fly over to Turkey and meet with Erdogan and some maybe in Pakistan and say, hey, can you help us bring Iran, then whoever's going to be in the Iran, and you wait 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, whatever it is. Can you help us make contact with the new people in charge to begin to broker what their future is going to look like in terms of letting them get it back on their feet, letting them start selling their oil production so they can stabilize their economy so that their people aren't pissed at which pretty much I'm sure many of them already are. And you start to get this thing under control diplomatically, politically, and economically. And then unfortunately, in the other part of that, Trump needs to get on the phone with Bibi and say enough. That's it. You got what you wanted. You're done. No more. Right? And that's it. And if you do it again, you're on your own. And if he can say that publicly, I think what you do is that's his finger in the dike. And he stops the outflow of the dam that's cracking right now for him and for the Republican Party and the MAGA movement. Right? Because what you're going to do, if this thing prolongs through the midterms and keeps going and we go into 27 And in 28, you can forget the presidency in 28. There's no doubt in my military mind, my political mind, and my mind as a U.S. citizen that conservatives can keep the White House in 28 if we are still engaged in a war with Iran by then. All right? All right. What do you think, Jordy? That was a ton.
That was a ton, but it was good. There is a ton. That's the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about with this. That's why the Middle East is as complex as it is. That's why it's always been as complex as it is. But again, what can you do? You can stay informed. The other aspect of that you can do is if you've got a desire to want to know more, then bombard the White House, bombard your state senators, bombard your congressmen, bombard the people who are in the know and demand real answers. What is the tactics? What is the plan? How are we going to end this? How are we going to stabilize the Middle East? Right? Because that's what quells people's worries. And right now, people are worried. I'm worried. I know you're worried. I know you're worried for your family. You're worried for your future. I've had 3 people just in the last 24 hours ask me, hey, David, is it safe to travel? Can I travel? And that was domestically. They're not going over to Europe or Africa or Eastern Europe. They're going or to the Middle East, right? Although I just definitely had, I'm in this big group text from my lacrosse teammates from Penn State. And one of my guy in there got stranded over in the Middle East for 10 days. He could not get out. And so that's a reality. All right. We are in a destabilized world right now. And so we need to be able to reassure the American population that we know what we're doing. We're not going to repeat in Iraq. We're not going to repeat in Afghanistan or Vietnam or whatever it is. And that this is a new dawn of American military prowess and power, which we already know, but also a new dawn for American diplomacy. All right. I hope you enjoyed today. Please like, share, and follow. You can follow me. I'm commenting pretty regularly on X at Team Frog Logic and on Instagram at Team Frog Logic. You can follow the show on all social media. I'm planning to get back on Facebook. I might even start a TikTok account here. Jordy's been pushing me to do that. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm going to start posting there maybe. But primarily I'm on X. That's what I think is the number one news site in the world. So you can follow me if you want to follow the show there. It's at D Rutherford Show. All other social media is at David Rutherford Show. Most importantly, on YouTube, we would really love you to go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Obviously, from a revenue perspective, that's massive for us, as well as also to get us in the algorithms so that more people can hear my commentary and get a little bit of flashbang of truth. And trying to consolidate the tsunami of information into a contextual way so you can have a better understanding of what decisions you can make for the future. All right. Hoo-yah. God bless you. And God bless Christ Almighty.